So there's your book. As you can see, it's so small, so wonderful. It is, as I like to say, a gem of a game, as it is travel friendly, it is fun, it is something that you can get going with any of your friends, be it friends that are in role-playing games or the ones that are not familiar with the hobby. But anyways, what is this game? Well, first of all, it is a rollover D6 pool type of game. So you would have your regular radioactive D6s, right? And you just get them going. And then you might ask, well, okay, that's fine, but what do I roll for? Well, if you look at the documentation, you have some stats as in other games. So your basic stats, the ones that you are already familiar with, so strength, wisdom, and dexterity, are called aspects here, and they are kind of thematically renamed into brute, aptitude, instinct, and reflex. And basically you look at those and you roll your dice of 3d6s, and you have to meet or beat the value. The notation in this game is actually 1d, 2d, 3d. Each time you see that, you don't need like 1d6, 2d6. It's always 1d, 2d, 3d. So that's the notation. If I say roll 3d, that's 3d6. If I say roll 2d, that's 2d6. Simple enough. So what are some other rolls that exist? D3 is actually roll a d6 and then divide by 2. So, or just look at it as 1 and 2 are 1, 3 and 4 are 2, and 5 and 6 are 3. Yeah. Some of the rolls can be like with advantage, where you get some extra dice, and those are easy rolls. Some tasks are harder to complete, and those are hard rolls. So easy rolls give you 1 extra die to roll, so you would add another one. The hard roll gives you -1. Give that back, put it in the slime. And the slime is mandatory. You have to own one slime that you keep your d6s in, so they don't run away. So anyways, you would be rolling to do stuff. So how do you accomplish anything? Well, you roll action tests. That is basically your roll to see if you achieved something, and those are always starting with d3. So you will see further down the line, skills are actually action tests, but bear with me. To beat an action test, you would need to have at least one die beat one of the corresponding attributes. And of course, there are some actions that are sustained, which means you need more successes to be able to beat them. So let's say you're trying to unlock a door and it is a quite complicated lock. So each round you're rolling a couple of dice to see how much you succeeded. Let's say 2 are success this time, well, next time you roll another one. Usually these sustain actions are around like how much you succeed out of at least 2, but if you wanted to sustain for longer periods of time, you would say out of 10. So you roll, next turn you roll again, next turn you roll again, of course with modifiers, and you keep track of all the successful rolls. Once you have reached the number that is needed to beat a sustained action, you have unlocked the door and you can go in right in time before the cannibals catch up to you. Of course, as in any other game, you have fumbles and you have crits. Here, when you crit, that's called a bullseye. Basically, whenever 2 or more dice are 6s, then you have a bullseye. And the bullseye, of course, as in any other game, gives you some extra damage, or maybe the effect of your what you're trying to do is better, and all that stuff. Of course, there's also fumble when these 2 are 1s, and that is called snake eyes. And the same thing goes. You have out of your pool, 2 or more dice are 1s. That's snake eyes. Of course, as in any other game, that's a fumble. But what happens when you get both snake eyes and bullseyes? Well, they cancel out, but everyone gets 1 free XP, because this is very rare to happen. To have 2 6s and 2 1s, that requires you to have quite some luck, right? Okay, let's get this out of the way. Oh my god, the radioactive slime, it's everywhere. You also have some other stats, and that is your saves, which here are called mobility, which is kind of like your dex saves, Toxins, which is kind of your fortitude saves, will, and death. Of course, when you have mobility, whenever you're in a sudden threat of something that requires you to move fast, get out of the way, rocks are falling down, radioactive slimes are falling down, and you need to roll to see if you evade that. Also, Toxins, again with the radioactive slime, if you have eaten this, for example, then I have to roll to see if I actually survive that, if that damages my body in any way. Of course, if I'm looking at someone who has psychic powers and he's trying to dominate my mind, I would roll a will save to see if I evade that. Other things that affect your mind are also something that you roll will for. And of course, if you're down, if you have taken too much damage and you're dying, you roll to see if you're dead or you get back on your feet and fight. And yeah, these are called fate tests here. So basically saves, they take one action. And one important thing that I forgot to mention is that you need to roll a 6 for the fate test to pass. So let's say I have eaten the slime and I have a condition. I failed my fate test and I have a condition now. Well, I can try to roll a fate test on each sequential turn that I have as an action, and then see if I've gotten rid of the slime's effect on my body. Let's go even deeper into what your character has on the character sheet. So what are other character stats? Well, we talked about aspects and fate, which are kind of like your stats and your saves. Now let's talk about stats that are derived from these ones, and that is first your guard. Whenever an enemy attacks you or you attack an enemy, this guard value is basically a penalty on your dice pool when you roll to affect that creature or for it to affect you. If you're caught off guard, you're surprised, well, your enemy gets a bonus die. The other derived stat is grit, and grit is basically a cool version of your HP. It is basically the amount of like action and beating and everything you can take. You can look at it as fuel for your character. So an interesting thing here is that you can actually spend grit, and you can spend it to do a couple of things, like activate some talents or powers, or add 1d to your tests, and you can only add maximum of 3 dice to your tests, or ignore damage from a certain damage source, so also maxed at 3 dice, and you would spend like 1 grit for 1 die, 1-to-1. The last derived stat is carry, and yeah, it is self-explanatory how much you can carry. All of these are calculated and derived and all that. I will show you that in the character creation video. For now, it's just important that you know what exists in this system. And with that, we come to skills. Skills are nothing more than fancy names for your aspects. So if you have a skill that requires you to use your strength, your skill would basically just add a bonus if you're skilled in something or not. For example, you need to lift something very heavy. Well, are you skilled in deadlifting? I'm making this up right now, but let's say you're skilled in deadlifting, you would get 1 additional die to roll to beat your brute. If you're not skilled, then you get a minus 2d to your roll and try to beat brute. So the skills are not something that you have like specific other number for. You're either skilled or not skilled in them, and with that you get like bonuses to your rolls against aspects. How you improve these skills and get a bigger bonus is with bullseyes. So anytime you get a bullseye, you write it down in a little circle on your character sheet. When you have 6 of these, now you're even better at the skill, so you add an additional die to your pool. And as you can imagine, you can get pretty good at some things. Also, you will see in character creation you have some talents, and these talents cost you 1 grit to activate. They are an action if you roll for them. You will see in the talent description it says like roll a die. In that case, activating a talent is an action, otherwise you just spend grit and your talent is activated. Now let's talk about game flow. So it is recommended to always stay in turns, and like you go around the table, everyone gets a turn. Outside of like combat or any situation where you have to keep track of like smaller increments of time, you can say one action is 1 hour, or one turn is 1 hour or whatever. You can really like stretch it or squeeze it as much as you want. And each of the players gets 2 actions. What are actions? I will put it somewhere on the screen there, so you can read that. Basically making a move, making an action, doing a test, that sort of thing. And the last thing I want to mention is movement or distance. You have the close distance, which is like your melee range. You have the near distance, which is around 30 feet. That's one standard move, is to cover the near distance. Then you have the far distance, which is double the near distance, and that is something that's in your ranged attack range, I would say, but not your melee. And you have the distance, which is kind of like twice the far range, and like outside of the scene. We will go through combat, we will go through character creation, all that good stuff, GM's guide after that, and you can expect some session recaps after all of that. Bye bye!